Hello everyone. It's been a while since we've done one of these. Today, I want to talk about a problem that I see pretty much constantly all over D&D communities. That problem being murder hobos. The dreaded adventurer that refuses to engage with the story in a meaningful way, and instead just kind of kills every NPC that has the audacity to interact with them. Personally, I kind of find that murder hobos are, in a lot of ways, misunderstood by DMs that are unprepared for them, and most of the online guides on the subject kind of treat it as a bit of a joke and don't actually offer any help for something that can be a very serious problem and that can in fact damage the enjoyment of both the players and the DM, especially if it's one player that's doing it and everybody else wants to be, a good guy that saves the day, because that's what most people kind of want to be. For that reason, I wanted to make this video and put my own thoughts to video form on how I've handled such players in the past, and maybe you can take some inspiration from this and be a little bit more prepared for when it happens to you. Disclaimer: if you do things right, the murder hobo may be displeased, but the rest of the party will be glad for you taking action. And always remember, if you really don't want this player at your table, you can just tell them to leave. You're the DM, you make the rules, it's your table, you're the one putting in the most time investment. Just tell them to leave if you really don't want this player at your table. With all of that being said, let's actually get into the video. Murder hobo players are usually just players who want to experience the game as violent marauders. In essence, a chaotic evil player. This isn't necessarily a problem unless it goes against the party at large's wishes. In a situation where the party is displeased with their murderous companion, it's important to not punish the entire party for the actions of the one. Sometimes a simple conversation can solve your problem. Pull this player aside and let them know that they're hurting other people's enjoyment of the game, and ask them to either play differently or just switch characters if they feel like the character they're currently playing cannot be played in a different way. Maybe you can save it for a future campaign where the whole party is on board with his or her rampaging ways. Now, when this fails, and we both know that it probably will, you have three options. Number one, you can make sure that your party knows they are allowed to step in and stop their companion if they so desire. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that they have to kill them on the spot, but if they see the edgy rogue who hasn't spoken two words to them since they left the tavern at level 1 pulls out his dagger and tries to stab the harmless village girl, I feel like it's not that difficult to understand that the fighter steps in and stops him physically, just gets in the way, stops the attack. Perfectly reasonable thing to do. Now, the murder hobo might see this as insulting and attack the fighter, in which case, just tell the fighter that he's allowed to defend himself. He is. The other player attacked him first, right? At the same time, if the other players do see their evil rogue companion murder a bunch of innocent villagers, and they want to kill him for it because, it's a lawful good paladin and the priest and all of this stuff, yeah, they might want to kill him over these things. Tell them that they can, in the same way that the other player is allowed to do these things. Again, if your party doesn't want to engage in PvP, there are other solutions. So let's talk about those. Violent crimes tend to attract the attention of what you would call armed guards, who are more than willing to arrest out-of-towners who show up and immediately start causing trouble. It's really the simplest thing to just show up with overwhelming force, declare that the player must surrender and be arrested, and then proceed with the campaign from there. Of course, if they resist, well, you've got overwhelming force, so just kill them. Or beat them into submission and then arrest them. This actually opens up a pretty fun option, because now, assuming of course that the murder hobo who was being disruptive and making everybody's game less enjoyable gets upset and walks out, because usually this is what happens, at least what's happened to me both times that this has happened, now you have an angry, deranged NPC who is a serial killer and has a reason to go after the party for revenge because, well, they betrayed him. They left him to die. They left him to go to jail and eventually face execution. But he breaks out and now he can chase the party down. So you've now created content for the rest of the party off of the murder hobo. You gotta think about this stuff. The final alternative is the Revenant. Revenants are immortal undead creatures born from the spite of one who was unjustly slain. They pursue the one who wronged them without rest, seeking to slay them in retribution. Make sure to tailor this Revenant to deal with the player character you're trying to punish. This should not be a fair fight. Resistances and immunities to the player's preferred damage types, fighting in a way that prevents the character from engaging in a way they prefer, using magic items that specifically disrupt the character so as to prevent their escape, leveling up the Revenant to be at the same tier as the player characters, because the Revenant is a CR5 creature. So if we're talking about a character who's level 12, 13, 15, 14, maybe 20, you might want, probably not 20, but if we're talking about a higher level character, you're probably going to want to level up the Revenant to be at around the same tier of power. And remember, Revenants are not mindless. A creature such as this, while murderous and mostly unreasonable, would make its intentions clear to the rest of the party and not attack them unless they attempt to stop it from pursuing its goal of revenge. All of these solutions, if successful, will remove the offending character, and quite possibly the player as well. So these should only be done in a situation where the murder hobo in question is not to the liking of the rest of the party. That's the most important detail. In the case where your entire party is filled with murder hobos, well, then you're actually dealing with a completely different situation that, personally, I would not consider to be problematic. What you have instead is an evil party that wants to pillage and maraud around the countryside, murdering villages and engaging in their most vile and base desires. In this situation, your campaign will likely require a major shift, as they are no longer the heroes of the story. They're the villains. This means you won't be delving into dungeons and fighting orcs, necromancers, and evil dragons. You'll be going up against knights, priests, and good dragons. The party's dungeons will become villages and towns whose people fight tooth and nail to preserve their peaceful way of life, only to be slaughtered for their lack of preparation. Villages aren't known for their security. The party's grand opponent is no longer an evil lich sitting on a tower filled with traps and monsters to slay any would-be invaders. It's the king, whose subjects have been terrorized by the party, and so he's forced to send out his most trusted knights and paladins to stop the murderous rampage. If the party has a patron, it won't be some adventurers' guild looking to reward them for protecting the people. It'll be a shadowy guild of villains whose existence is dedicated to tearing down all the good things in the world. Such a party's ambitions would lie in power, in controlling the ones they choose to spare, and in feeling invincible in a world that fears them. Take the example of the Dead Three, Bane, Baal, and Merkel. These three were originally adventurers themselves, a fighter, an assassin, and a necromancer of epic power whose ambition lay in godhood. Such was their power that they slaughtered their way through an entire army of undead, and including 12 liches, and confronted the god Jurgle, demanding to take the divinity from him. And Jurgle then had them use the bones of the 12 liches to play a number of games in order to decide who would get which part of his portfolio. No, I'm not kidding, that's the actual story, and yes, the liches were still quote-unquote alive and conscious while this was happening. Personally, if I am somebody's bodyguard and I get my ass whooped and then that somebody starts playing games with my body parts, with the dudes that just killed me, I'm pissed. I'm pissed. Regardless, this type of thing drives home the importance of a session zero. Honestly, above all else, if you're gonna make a campaign for D&D, the first thing you have to think about, and genuinely the most important one after you've constructed the world, because you can just pick up somebody else's world, you can just use Forgotten Realms, you can do any of the official settings so you don't actually have to build anything yourself. But the one thing that you always have to do as a DM is understand what your players want out of your game. Bring up these topics with your players. Set your boundaries as a DM and allow your players to set theirs. This is easily the most important thing to do. I cannot stress it enough. Ask your players what type of characters they plan to make. Personally, I prefer to make the characters together. You know, we just... usually at the same time slot that we'd be doing D&D in, the session 0 essentially, and we just roll stats together, decide on characters together, and then everything else is workshopped after that. But the main defining core of the characters is decided together so as to avoid these sorts of situations. It also prevents accusations of cheating. If your players want to do a gimmick, such as a wandering band of bards, a group of paladins of different oaths going on a joint crusade, or a marauding band of murderous thugs, ask them so you can plan ahead, so you can give to them the campaign that they want to play. And above all else, make sure that everyone knows ahead of time what type of adventure that they are agreeing to. D&D is meant to be fun, but it's also a very large investment of both time and commitment, so communication is key. And as much fun as D&D is meant to be, communication is a very serious thing and should be treated as such. I hope this video helped you out, and I hope you had a good time watching. As always, like and subscribe if you want more, follow the Twitch if you want to catch me streaming, and check out StackUp if you'd like to donate to veterans of both US and Allied forces. All links are in the description. And with all that being said, have a good one, and cheers.